See if I can take the screen away from you. There we go.
By the way, everybody, we are being recorded tonight.
Yes, so welcome everybody and Happy New Year. I think we were all happy to see 2020 go. And this is our Hawks first meeting of 2021. And we are so delighted that everybody was able to join us. Because of the, oh, hang on a second, let me get this back to share. There we go. Because we're doing all of our meetings Zoom-wise these days, it is a very easy to reach out to people outside of our geographic boundaries. We are Matthews and South Charlotte based, but hopefully some people from all over are joining us this evening to hear Kim DeLozier. So just a brief outline of who Hawk is. We are the first chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, and as I said, we're based in Matthews and South Charlotte. And our mission was to create a network of people who are interested in the same thing, who can raise our voices up to elected officials when the need arises for more support for environmental causes, and also offer educational opportunities like the meeting we're doing tonight. And then we also perform a lot of conservation projects around the Matthews and South Charlotte areas. And how can you help? Well, number one is build your own wildlife habitat. Everybody's got a backyard, a balcony, a patio, maybe a little front porch. You can provide for the wildlife no matter how big or small. Once you've done that, get it certified. Support Hawk through donations, or we need volunteers. So we'd love to welcome you to the leadership team, or to have you come and join us on projects that we do around town. Also support the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, because that's who we report up to. And then the North Carolina Wildlife Federation is the state affiliate of the National Wildlife Federation. So all those organizations would love to have your support if you love wildlife. Also, to quote Tim Wiki quoting Andy Griffith, take a kid fishing, or birding, or hiking, or hunting, or whatever your outdoor passion is, but introduce that kid to the outdoors. You can reach us at our email address, hawkncwf@gmail.com. We also have a website, hawkncwf.com, or you can reach us on our Facebook page, Habitat and Wildlife Keepers. So we would love to have you get involved with us however you would like to. Through the presentation this evening, we're going to be taking your questions. Down at the bottom of the screen, you've got a place where you can ask a question. So we encourage you as it comes up to type your question in. Daniel and I will be moderating those questions, and when Kim gets done with his presentation, we will submit your question. We'll combine the ones that are similar, and we'll have him answer those questions for you. And now, without further ado, I do want to let's see here. Need to go. Oh, one thing I also want to say is if you were able to join us for our Dr. Tallamy presentation, prior to that presentation, he signed a lot of his books for Hawk supporters, and they are on sale. All the proceeds go to Hawk, but they're on sale at Birdhouse on the Greenway and Wildology in South Charlotte. Both of those locations have the signed books. So if you want to support Hawk and learn how to provide for the wildlife in your backyard, this is the best book for it. Also, I want you to join us in February. We're having Trees Charlotte come and talk to us about their effort. If you have driven around town at all in the last couple of years, you've noticed that a lot of trees have come down, and they're going to talk about their efforts to try to replace the tree canopy that we have lost. So it's a great presentation. There'll be some trivia involved, maybe some games. So we hope you'll join us for that. That's going to be February the 2nd, the first Tuesday of each month, and that will also be a Zoom presentation, also at 6:30. So. And without further ado, Kim DeLozier, I met Kim years ago. He came to our annual meeting in Raleigh and presented his work with the the animals in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. He for 32 years, he was a wildlife management person at Great Smoky Mountain National Park, which we all love. And as only he can tell him many stories about some of the wildlife he encountered. He's written 2 books, Bear in the Backseat and Bear in the Backseat 2, which I highly recommend. Funny, touching, just a lot of great anecdotes about what it would be like to have his job. And I think most of us on this call tonight would have given our right arm to have the life he's had for 32 years in that national park. And now he retired and is starting the whole thing over again. He's now working with Appalachian Bear Rescue. So we've invited him here tonight to talk about his adventures over the years, and also how we can help the Appalachian Bear Rescue. So Kim, I am going to turn this over to you. And again, everybody, I encourage you to ask those questions in the chat feature and the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen.
Okay, Carol, I'm going to try to jump in here and share screen.
You just go ahead and snatch it.
Okay, let's see. Yes, okay. Here we go. There. Can you see that okay, Carol?
I can. It's
Okay,
it's
good.
great.
Well, good. It's I appreciate it, Carol. I appreciate it very much. It's good to be with you guys tonight and everything too. And Happy New Year to all. It's a 2021 has to be much better than 2020. I don't think that's no one's going to disagree with that at all too. But anyway, Carol's right. I spent 32 years in Great Smoky Mountains National Park as the working in wildlife biologist, and left there about 10 years ago. Then I started working for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, working on elk restoration throughout the eastern U.S. And last spring, I knew it was probably the right time when things started slowing down with COVID getting going. I resigned from that position, then started working for the Appalachian Bear Rescue, really working on bear wise. The whole basis of bear wise, and actually going in and trying to I guess work with landowners, with HOAs, with different businesses to try to hopefully determine what their problem is if they're having bear issues, and how we might be able to curtail those or rectify those issues too. So we're just getting started. Of course, the COVID thing has kind of slowed us down a little bit, but we've actually changed some businesses in Gatlinburg where we've actually been able to incorporate some bear-proof garbage cans in an area that didn't have them before. Been that way for 50-something years. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm gonna be working on, I think, for a while. It's probably my last job at least. So I still live on my family farm here in eastern Tennessee, and probably that's where I'll be for a while too. So anyway, let's jump into it right now. We'll talk about really talk about Great Smoky Mountains National Park, bears and wildlife and things like that too. I've really got a lot of stories and stuff too. We don't have enough time to cover, just scratch the surface too. But anyway, I want to tell you real quickly that I've been very, very blessed to have the position. I started in 1978. And if you put that in perspective, for those of you who have gone through Pigeon Forge, in 1978, there was not a single red light in Pigeon Forge. And so the first one that went in, I was really upset because I kept thinking I'll never get to work now with that darn red light there. So things changed. Little did I know what was getting ready to happen too. And so anyway, but we made it too. So good job. Started as a wild boar hunter for the government, working then with hog control, with bears, with reintroductions, first with peregrine falcons, river otter, 10 years of the red wolf, and then the elk was kind of the last thing that I worked on too. So anyway, it's been a really, I guess it's one of those positions when I was a little boy, someone would have said, son, what would you like to do when you grow up? And that's kind of what I got to do. So I'm pretty fortunate too. So let's get going here. So Great Smoky Mountains National Park, of course, it rides on the top of the ridge there between North Carolina and Tennessee. I'll go through these really quickly. One of the most diverse parks, southern tip of the spruce fir forest. Probably get a lot of diversity from the northern species. Over 800 square miles, 2,900 miles of streams, 19,000 species, 10,002 from the ATBI initiative. Probably over 1,500 flowering plants, 200 bird species, 68 mammal, 67 fish species, 37 reptiles, and 48 or 43 amphibian species too. Of course, the Smokies is known as the salamander capital of the world. And also we're known for visitation too. I'm not sure what the numbers, I hadn't actually seen the numbers, but I think 2019 it was 12 and a half. And my guess is it's probably more than that in 2020. Anyway, one of the big reasons a lot of people come here is, of course, it's a great place to visit, but it's we're about a 4-hour drive from a third of the U.S. population. So that's another reason that we're easy to get to. And I promise you, last year there was a lot of people here. So really just kind of what I tell people we do in wildlife management, we really, protect the things that should be there, like, bears and deer and other native species, get rid of the things that shouldn't be, like wild boars and other exotic species, and then try to bring back what we can. We know we can't bring back everything. A lot of people had interest in bringing back the bison. Of course, there's probably too much conflict with visitors and Cage Cove and other places. The only place probably we were able to put them there too. So there's some things we can't. We had to table some things like the fisher, which may have had a conflict with the northern flying squirrel during years of low prey availability. So we kind of tabled some, we kind of eliminated some, but we're able to bring a few back too. So it's been a good effort. Some of the things that we always get, of course, everybody thinks Great Smoky Mountains National Park is a place to release their wildlife and think they're going to live happily ever after. We've had capuchin monkeys that we've caught there near the Visitor Center in Sugar Lands. We've had a ladies' emu population escape, and a lot of those actually, some of them got hit on the highway. We had one that actually had chased a lady down the low elevation trail, and so anyway, I called the lady who owned them. I said, ma'am, we're going to have to do something. We've got emus everywhere here around the Tennessee side of the park. She says, well, I hope you don't have to kill them. I said, we don't really want to kill them, but I'm not sure how we catch them. She said, well, you can grab them by the neck. And I said, well, okay. But I said, if you grab them by the neck, will they not kick you? She said, well, most of the time they won't kick you. So I said, okay, well, that means some of the time they will. She said, oh yeah, they can kick backwards and sideways very, very strong. They could break your leg. So I said, ma'am, I'm not sure we're going to catch them. But anyway, we got a lot of those out as well too. Had a cow, of course, escaped, a local cow escaped too, and we were able to dart her. I think you might be able to see, yeah, if you look right there, you can see a little dart sticking right there in her hindquarter that we kind of give her a shot to calm her down. And we put her on the news, the 6 o'clock news, and actually found someone who claimed her, and we actually took her home, and she lived happily ever after. Cage Cove is a big draw for people, probably 2 million visits to that one area of the park too. Of course, we have a lot of people there. We have wildlife there too. People see it. It's just a place where everything congregates too. We've had actually deer. Of course, people feed deer. They'll feed a lot of things as well too. There's just not enough rangers to be able to stop and break that cycle of people feeding wildlife too. So I think it's getting better. I think we're probably having people police other people about throwing food to wildlife or bears or deer, whatever too. So I've seen that change probably in a 30 or 40 year period where before it was kind of acceptable by a lot of visitors to feed wildlife, and that's not true anymore. I put this down, they love Doritos. Remember, we were trying to determine which deer were coming to the roadside that people were feeding. The ranger wanted me to move the deer, and I wanted the rangers to write more tickets. So anyway, I watched the deer for a while, and nothing would come to the road. And so the lady that was with me was eating a bag of Doritos. And I said, when you get finished with that, can I have that bag? She said, sure. So we pulled up around the curve and pulled up near the edge of the field, and I rolled the window down. Well, it's that rolling window down, that you don't do that anymore, but we rolled the window down. And I got the bag out, started crinkling the bag and making noise. They all raised their heads up. Here come one doe, wide open right towards us. And it caught me off guard, but we actually loaded a dart. I darted that deer, put it in the transfer cage. I thought, heck, if it worked once, we'll try it again. Repeated the activity, and sure enough, they all raised their head. Here come one wide open. We darted her, put her in there, and I thought, you know what, this is going to be pretty easy. So we did the same thing the third time. They all raised their head and looked at each other as if they were saying, does he think we're crazy or what? And so no more actually approached that. So we took those two and moved it. So, and we had some skunks, of course, before coyotes moved in. It was skunk heaven in Cades Cove. They were in the fields, they were in the picnic areas, they were in the campgrounds, they were under picnic tables, campers, and whatever. So they were skunks everywhere. So we had a little boy bitten by a skunk there, and I got a directive from the superintendent. We have got to reduce the number of skunks that were food conditioned skunks in the campground and picnic area. So we spent a couple evenings. We went out and actually used little blowguns with little 0.5 cc darts with a drug called ketamine hydrochloride. We went around and actually darted these skunks and moved some of them to the western end of the park too. So that was not a very pleasant activity, but anyway, we learned a lot. Oh, sorry about that. Wild hog, I won't spend too much time on this. I'm probably going to keep on checking my time because I'll run out of time. But anyway, the parks moved. Actually, we've documented the removal of over 12,000 hogs out of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And, you know, pigs are the most prolific large mammal in North America. They're kind of like a big rabbit. And, you know, and the problem with they're exotic, which means, of course, they're not native. But the problem they have is they eat so much. I mean, pigs really just eat so much native, natural food from the native wildlife that it really reduces the amount of native species that we have or native animals that we have. So they eat tremendous amounts of acorns, which is really the main food for our wildlife in the Smokies in the fall. I mean, it's they need that food source, energy source, so they can basically, you know, survive and reproduce over the winter and next spring too. So pigs actually kind of mess all that up as well too. So we have an active trapping, shooting program. We did relocate pigs at one time to the states of Tennessee and North Carolina. And then because of the concern over pseudorabies and swine brucellosis, they said they didn't want any more. And we said, that's fine. So we went ahead and started putting all those animals down as well too. So anyway, it's a very labor intensive project. I'll tell you one quick story. There, that bottom part, CNN interview. You know, I think in the early years, CNN had caught wind of our program and wanted to come to interview us. And we thought we were big time then. So anyway, we had a pig in a trap, did a stand-up, basically talked about what we'd done, what we'd accomplished. And then when we finished, we were going to put the hog, which is in the trap, on the ground, put it in the back of the vehicle and let them drive off. And that would be the end of the interview. Well, when we picked the pig up in the trap to slide in the back of the truck, we didn't realize there was a hole in the bottom of the chain link fence, but the pig saw that though. And he bowed up, and I mean, he busted through the bottom of that trap and he took off running across this little field down behind our maintenance area and wildlife building too. Of course, we were all in shock, and the pig ran over probably 40 yards or so and stopped and turned around and looked at everybody. It was like he was thinking about what he should do. Well, we knew what he was thinking, because here he'd come at warp speed back towards us. Well, you know, everybody, it's kind of every person for themselves when a wild boar comes charging towards you. So I turned around and jumped in the back of the truck, and the back of the truck was already full. How they got in the back of that truck so fast, I'll never know. But they got in the back of the truck too. The pig got me. He was down trying to cut my legs, and I was trying to slap his ears and his head, trying to divert him from my legs. And another guy jumped out with a big pole and actually was going to go after the pig, and the pig went after him, and he started slinging his head back and forth and actually cut the back of his breeches legs, come close to absolutely ripping into his skin too. So anyway, the way wild pigs actually fight, they do sling their head. And when those teeth go together, those tusks, they actually will act kind of like a pair of scissors, and they'll sharpen themselves just by rubbing it back together. So the back part of that tusk is the really sharp part and the dangerous part. So that's why they throw their heads back and forth to cut dogs or kill dogs or other predators or whatever's after them. So anyway, after the pig actually cut this Rick's pants and stuff, he took off and went across the river and out of sight. So I turned around to make sure everybody was okay. Of course, everybody was kind of still in shock, and I looked over at the guy over there, and I looked, and the guy who was the videographer for CNN, he never missed a beat. He videoed the whole thing. And so I went up to him. I said, hey, I said, I think his name was John. I said, John, what are you going to do with that video? He said, oh, nothing. They probably won't do anything with that. You know, they probably just wants to film everything too. So I said, okay, all right. So I didn't think any more about it. In about 2 or 3 weeks, I got a call from a friend of mine in Washington State that said, hey, I saw you on TV last night too. So they apparently had sold that and it made the circuit around and people got a thrill out of that too. But we didn't think it was that funny, but some other people did. So anyway, but pigs are there. They've changed their techniques on control now to where they have drop nets, or they have large corral type traps too. And they actually have a camera on there and they can turn that camera on and see how many pigs are actually in the trap at that time. And they actually can release the door or drop the door actually from the residence too. So it's come a long way from where we were here with Blake McCann with a shotgun with a light attached to that. So it's come a long way. Night vision, it was really good for a while. Now thermal imaging really has changed the whole course of work on pigs because they're primarily nocturnal animals, and you have to work primarily at nighttime, or at least a large part of your time at nighttime as well. I want you to remember Blake McCann. I'll talk, maybe tell a story about him if I have time later. Well, let's jump into bears right now. And of course, bear management in the Smokies can be a challenge at times just because there's so many people. I think we have some very smart people that actually come to the Smokies, but for some reason, when they go across that boundary into the park, a lot of them go brain dead. And I have no idea why they act like they do. People want to get close to wildlife. People want to feed wildlife too, and they want to get a picture of it too. And so anyway, that makes it a challenge to be able to hopefully keep some separation distance between bears and between people. You know, we do talk trash a lot. We actually have kind of changed our management style from a proactive to a reactive. I'm sorry, from a reactive to a proactive bear management program. And reactive really prior to 1990 was where we basically were, along with most bear management agencies in their conservation groups in the country. Most of them would wait till a bear becomes food condition, was very habituated or food condition, and then they try to take some action. By then, the behavior had already become established so much that they really couldn't do anything much about it too. And then there's a whole thing of relocation we'll talk about in a second. Should you relocate? Should you not relocate? And there's some discussion on that as well too. But you think about what our battle is. I mean, think about how much garbage is generated from 12.5 million visitors. There's a lot. And so we even had at one point, we were working in Chimney's picnic area, which is the first place that we went in and started looking at nighttime garbage. And so we took volunteers and people who work for wildlife, and we went and actually cleaned all the garbage up at dark, moved the people out, closed the gate, secured everything too, and then monitored that area for bear activity at nighttime and to see if we could maybe start changing some of that bear behavior. And it worked really well. And a lot of people then became upset because people were coming from Gatlinburg and other areas to see bears in Chimneys, and they were not be able to see them anymore. And so they were pretty upset about that. And people started actually hiding food up in the vegetation, trying to draw bears into. So it was a battle at one time too. You know, it's not a secret. Bears actually can injure people and kill people. And how we manage those, it's kind of a polarizing type of a decision. Some people think it's the right thing to put a bear down. Some people think it's never the right thing to put a bear down. Some people believe it's okay to relocate a bear. Some people think it's crazy to relocate a bear. And so there's really no patent answer for every situation. Every bear incident is different. Every bear is different. Even though they look the same, they all have different personalities. And it's just like people. They all react differently. They all have different degrees of habituation, or they have different degrees of being food conditioned too. So something I want to really throw in here right now for you all to be thinking about. If you're the bear manager, how would you deal with a bear that was reported to be following people on a trail? What would you do? Do nothing? Post signs? Capture the bear and move it? Put the bear down? What would you do? Close the trail? Or if you had a bear feeding on, let's say on a blackberry, on some blackberries beside a trail, Or if you had a bear that rips into a tent where there are no people, it's not occupied, there are no people in the tent. Or you have a bear that rips into a tent at nighttime that is occupied and we have people inside the tent. Think about the options of what you might do to that particular bear to hopefully mitigate that situation. Or in the case of a bear that attacks someone, injures someone, or even in the case where it actually kills someone. Now of course, we've had one person that we know of killed by a bear. May the 21st of 2000, had Glenda Bradley, who was a local school teacher. So we may talk about that here a little bit too. Okay, there it is, May 21st, 2000, Glenda Bradley too. That was the first known human fatality caused by a bear in the Southeast too. And a lot of people really didn't believe it. They did not think that bears were capable of killing people. And we've always known that was the case. Bears had actually preyed on people, killed people before in the northern areas. But I think the farther north that you go, the people actually probably move up the list on the prey species. So at the south, I think there's a lot of food here too, and it's less likely that it's going to look at people as a source of food. But it does happen occasionally. All the stars have to line up. It's extremely rare, but it can happen. And my guess is it's probably going to happen again in the future with the number of people that we have inside the park and with the density of the bears we have as well too. You can't keep on putting more and more bears there too. And bears tend to self-regulate themselves, their population too. Males will kick young males out and they'll move out, disperse out too. So, and males will kill cubs if they have the opportunity. So there's kind of a self-regulation trait in the bear population, not necessarily where it's always perfect, but there's going to be cycles where you have high bear densities and low bear densities as well. Glenda Bradley, she basically, it was on a Sunday afternoon. And I recall I was in park headquarters with one other person who was a dispatcher. It is actually, ironically, Bert Bradley was the dispatcher, and it was actually Glenda's cousin was there. And so I was there, and I heard the traffic said that, hey, there's someone here at Elkmont, and that they need a ranger here. I think they're lost. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So I kind of went back to work. I was working on actually the environmental assessment for bringing elk back into the park. And then the next traffic come in and said, no, there's someone here that is injured. And I'll never forget this part. They said, and the bears are still in the area. I remember I looked up at that radio. I said, what did they say? So I called Bert and I said, Bert, could you play that back for me? And he did. And I thought, that's what I thought they said. So I had a really weird feeling. To make a long story short, we called people in, rangers went up there, and there was a female bear with a yearling with her that apparently had killed Glenda. And it was no doubt that basically they were responsible for that. The bears were taken, they were both euthanized, and they were taken to the University of Tennessee and necropsied. And of course that confirmed that they were responsible for that. So it's a very tragic loss too. I've always felt kind of responsible for all the, up until I retired, felt responsible for what bears did. I felt like it's our job to make sure keep bears in a place where they should be, and hopefully keep people doing the right thing as well too. Anyway, very, very unfortunate. And we did have one case back in 1969. We had a 9-year-old boy that was lost up near Spence Field, and they never really turned up anything at all from his name was Dennis Martin, and never turned up any evidence what happened. No signs of Dennis after that. So could a bear have got him? Yeah, he could have. Typically, I don't think a bear would probably went after him. Other bears are probably going to wait till someone passes, but then they're probably going to take advantage of that carcass once that happened. And that reminds me of a story near Campsite 30, which is in Elkmont, up Little River Truck Road. And there was a guy who was hiking from Indian Gap coming down Sugarland Mountain Trail. And he apparently started having issues with sugar and diabetes, and became, disoriented, went off trail, went cross country, was just kind of randomly going from here to there. And I'm sure he was in diabetic shock at that time, but he ended up down at an area along a stream just above campsite 30. And he sat down there for a long time, and finally the Rangers had located him and gave him some food and stuff, and actually got him back where he was conscious. Well, as they were walking out, the Ranger told me that this gentleman said, "Hey, I had the weirdest dream there." He said, "I was dreaming that I was sitting there and there were bears like circling around me the whole time while I was sitting there on the ground." And the Ranger told me, he said, why I didn't tell him, but we found numerous piles of very fresh bear scat right around where this gentleman was sitting too. So in my opinion, I think that those bears were waiting for that gentleman to die before they actually preyed on his body too. So I think most bears are that way. Bears don't come out and say, "Hey, I'm gonna go kill somebody today," but I guess the risk is always there. But keep in mind, the risk of you being injured or killed by a bear is probably much less than what might occur if you drive your vehicle to the trailhead, or from let's say a sting reaction from a sting from a bee or something like that, some kind of a reaction from that. So yeah, it's a risk. It's not a big risk at all too, but I wouldn't discourage anybody from hiking in the park being worried about bears. We'll talk about that in a second too. I do want to tell you here about some predatory bear behavior to be thinking about, possible signs. It's extremely rare, as I said. Typically, they focus on the smallest person in the group. Now, there's power in numbers, so the more people you have, the closer they are together, the more they're going to be able to deter a bear and move a bear away. There's power in numbers. So anyway, but the smallest people are typically what a bear would go after, and that makes sense from a predator because they're going after something it's much easier to be able to take than versus a big person. Now, I'll never forget asking that after Glenda Bradley was killed in the park. I called Stephen Herrero, who was the author of the book Bear Attacks. And he and I talked about our words, our message on a lot of our signs and our brochures and things like that too. So we tweaked that after all this happened. And I asked Steve this, I said, "Steve, now Glenda was a little bit larger weight-wise than the bear. The bear only weighed like 112 pounds, and Glenda was a little bigger than that. So it didn't have to be a big bear." But I asked Steve, I said, if Glenda had been a person who was, let's say, a guy who was like 6'2" or 3 or 4 and weighed 250 pounds, what would have happened? And he said, "Kim, absolutely nothing. A bear probably would not go after somebody that big, that intimidating. So they tend to go after the smallest people, the people they feel like they have the best chance of taking down." So smallest people, that's why it's important not to let your kids or grandkids or whomever run ahead of someone on a trail, because those people will be most vulnerable if you encounter a bear that is in this very rare predatory bear behavior. Typically, it's not your garbage bears, not always, but typically it's bears that you've had no human food involved with it, so it's not your food condition bears. Generally speaking, everything I talk is a generally speaking issue. It's not 100%. Normally, there's no prior history of that bear. The persistence of the attack. In the case of that, I'll tell you this, Evan Paula here, who was 8 years old in August of 2008. Evan, his older brother, and dad were just above the Rainbow Falls parking area, and they were down at a stream, and they were leaving, going back up to the trail, back to their vehicle. Well, Evan was the first one climbing up the rock, and his brother turned around and saw this bear come up behind Evan, and his front paws, he had his front paws on Evan's shoulders, pushing him down, and he said his mouth was wide open, going for Evan's neck when he was pushing him down. He started screaming for help. His dad went on the attack of the bear and was telling Evan to run. So Evan took off running. He ran one way, the bear ran another way. Pow, they hit again, and the bear took him down the second time too. So the persistence of the attack is always a concern if it's a predatory behavior. So they play for keeps. They don't really play around with you too. Not always, but generally a predatory attack occurs in the spring and fall. Common sense will tell you they're coming up from their so-called hibernation, and they basically wake up, they're very hungry, they've lost weight, they're looking for food. So you're a little more susceptible then. Then the fall, where they're getting ready to go down for the winter, then they're going to eat as much as they can too. So that typically is not always. You look at your Evans case, there wasn't a fatality, but it was definitely a near miss. And if Evan had been alone, we probably would have a different outcome. So it's not always that. This Elora was April 13th. Elora Petracek, she was the second person that was killed by a bear in the Southeast. And it was around the time of Easter. And I went down and met with the TWRA and all the people there too. So Elora and her mother and her, I think, a 3-year-old son, I'm sorry, 3-year-old brother, were on a hike about a mile from their vehicle. They were from Ohio. They were going to this waterfall. And apparently they had observed a bear at the waterfall, became uncomfortable. There was another family there, another man and his wife there. So the mother of Elora said, let's go ahead and go back. I feel uncomfortable. So on the way back, they encountered this bear along the trail. It was a very narrow trail, very steep banks. And so guess what? The bear went after the little 3-year-old boy first. She grabbed him, and then the mother went on the attack and was fighting the bear, trying to get her little boy away from the bear that was attacking him. The other witness family came in and went around them, and the mother was able to get the little boy away from the bear and told this family to take her son with them and leave. So the mother was fighting the bear, and Elora apparently was up in the woods somewhere. They actually didn't know where she went to. But when the paramedics responded back to the scene, the mother lived, and she was laying there. Of course, she was bleeding. And the paramedic told me, he said, when I got to her, he said she barely could talk, but she said, she pointed, said, I heard my little girl behind me. So I'm just speculating that the mother was fighting the bear, and Elora probably saw that and probably started, yelling for her mom stuff too. And the bear probably went after Elora. And I'm not sure if the mom heard that or not, but anyway, I sure hope she didn't. So anyway, so that was the second fatality we had, which was pretty tough. Elora was a real pretty little girl too. She, you can look on, I think you can Google Elora's Light, and it has a little program there about her too. And it's what's interesting about this is that I think a week or two before that, Elora, when they were saying their prayers at nighttime with her mom, Elora asked her mom, said, what would happen if I die before you do? And of course, her mom reassured her that's probably not going to happen though, Elora. Typically, the older people, the parents, pass before the children. Of course, that didn't happen in this case too. So anyway, it was a pretty tough time too, and hope it never happens again. Also, last thing here, the male bears is typically male bears. The bear that killed Glenda Bradley was not a male. It was the female with a yearling, which was not normal. And typically it happens more at nighttime than daytime. And this was the case here where it was in daytime. So we had a couple things there too that didn't really fit the norm of what a predatory bear behavior would be too. There was a case in Arizona of where and it was at I think it was at a Girl Scout or Boy Scout camp too, 4-H camp. And a girl was there, and I think she was 14 years old. A bear came into her tent and actually attacked her. And she apparently laid there long enough to where this bear started feeding on her and actually ate 6 pounds of flesh off of her hip and leg. And then she started screaming for help, and people came in, ran the bear off, and they were able to go ahead and kill the bear and put the bear down too. But there was a big $14 million lawsuit over that, saying that the state had violated their protocol on bear management. And make a long story short, they settled out of court, I think, for $6 million, divided up between the state and 4-H, and I think the Forest Service too. Let's see how we're doing here. Okay. So anyway, I've always used that story when I'm working with cities or townships or whatever too, to say, hey, you know what? I told them that story. I said, I'll tell you one thing. You can buy a lot of bear-proof garbage cans with $14 million. I remember Stephen Herrero told me that up in Canmore, Alberta, Canada, that he'd been trying for years to get them to spend some money to buy bear-proof or animal-resistant garbage cans. And every time the response was saying, we just don't have the money. He said it wasn't until the first gentleman was killed by a brown bear there in Canmore. And he said after that happened, he said it was like $1 million floated out of the sky. And they started incorporating bear-proof garbage cans in the city too. Oh, let's see. Let me look right here and see what else I want to try to cover. This Tremont Jogger, this case here, the guy was jogging down the road during the daytime and a bear came out and there was a big confrontation between those two. The guy was fighting the bear, kicking it, throwing rocks at it, and then the bear would stop. He would turn and run, pow, he'd take off after him again. And so it wasn't until a vehicle drove up the road that this gentleman was able to jump on the hood of the vehicle and escape from this bear. So we dealt with that bear for probably a week until we feel very confident we caught the right bear. Of course, then we had to put that animal down too. I'll tell this one real quick. Kate's gold mother with her cubs too typically think we always put down the bear, which is not true. I think this was on a Tennessee, Alabama football weekend when Alabama had beat Tennessee, which has happened a lot. And of course, they beat a lot of people a lot. But anyway, these people were from Alabama and they were driving around the Cades Cove Loop. On the back side, there was a mother with some cubs off the road there. And so most all the people were being very good. They were keeping their distance, not getting off the road, taking pictures, things like that. These bears were grubbing in an old tree up there. This one gentleman from Alabama thought he would get a little closer. So he did an end around, come in back behind this group and actually climbed up over his log and jumped right on top of them. It startled the cubs. The cubs went every direction. It apparently made the mother pretty mad, and the mother took off after him, started chasing him too. And the gentleman told me that all he can say remembers is like someone hit him in the back and knocked him into this tree that was lying on the ground. Well, it hit him with enough force that a lot of the protruding limbs were sharp, and one of those limbs landed a home run into this gentleman's private parts and did some pretty serious damage, and which he had to go to the hospital and get sewn up too. And a lot of people had called me. They were concerned we were going to put this bear down, and I said, no, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I said, that was a provoked attack. It wasn't the bear's fault. She did what a bear's supposed to do. And so the gentleman got what he deserved. And so I said, what we're going to do, just tongue in cheek, I said, we are going to catch her though. We're going to put her in a captive breeding program and breed more bears just like her and release them all over the park, because there couldn't be a better mother bear than what this bear did too. So we didn't capture that bear, didn't do anything with her at all. And so things turned out okay. But the gentleman went back to Alabama in a small little community there. Anybody in this group is from Alabama? I apologize for telling this story. Typically, I always say, is anybody here from Alabama? And somebody raise their hand and I'll say, what about Georgia? What about Kansas? What about California? And sometimes I'll even have to go out of the country and go to France or somewhere too. And finally, until no one's from there, then I'll say, okay, this gentleman was from whatever no one was from. So anyway, he went back to his hometown. The park had released his name, and the local newspaper had made him look pretty silly. And so he was threatened to sue the park because they had released his name and stuff too. Nothing ever happened to him too. So anyway, let's see, that's kind of a case where the Bears won. I'll tell you real quickly, what do you do if you see a bear? Do you throw your food to it? Do you play dead? Should you carry pepper spray, things like that? I'll tell you really quickly, and not to spend any more time on it, but basically what we try to tell people to do, if you see a bear doing what a bear is supposed to be doing, leave it alone. Don't approach it. Keep your distance. Get your binoculars out and observe it. If a bear's traveling down a trail or down a stream or a ridge and it's heading your way, try to get out of its way. Give it the right of way and let it go and do where it's going to go. If it doesn't, if it turns off and it starts to approach you, that's where you basically can't outrun a black bear. You can't outclimb a black bear. So you're going to have to reestablish your dominance over that animal at that point. So like I said, there's power in numbers. Get everyone together if there's more than one person. Make yourself look big. I wouldn't have any trouble making myself look big, but also get up on a rock, on a log, you know, start yelling, screaming, get back bear, get back bear. You have to reestablish your dominance on that bear. You have to tell that bear that you're bigger and meaner than what it is. And sometimes that's hard to do when they're approaching you pretty fast. So this is a time where if you carry pepper spray, and I would recommend carrying pepper spray or bear spray they call, that basically if it gets close enough within 5 yards or something, I would probably think about deploying that too. Should you throw your food at it? So Steve Herrero and I, we had some discussion about that. He first thought we should, if you thought a bear was going to attack you, you should throw your food to it. I said, Steve, that's what everyone does now. If we encourage people to throw their food at it, we're going to food condition every bear in the Smokies. So we settle on some wording to where if a bear approaches you and it makes contact with you, if it grabs your leg, if it bites your leg, if it swats you, to separate yourself from your food. And then hopefully the bear will go after the food. It'll give you time to be able to exit the area and hopefully be safe by doing so. But if that bear looks at your food, and that happened in the case here with old Sugarlands with an elderly couple, if it goes to your pack, which has the smell of food in it or food in it, and then it's not interested and it comes towards you, that's to tell you it's a pretty good clue that that bear may be exhibiting a predatory behavior and you may be prey and you may be food. So if it jumps on you though, we tell people, this is a general statement, to fight back, do not play dead. Now, that doesn't work every time. There's a few rare cases where bears have stopped after the person quit fighting back. But when you're in that situation, it's hard to always think about the right thing to do because it's life or death situation. But typically, I would always advise people to fight back. In the case of brown bears, it's just the opposite. Typically, they should play dead. And once hopefully the threat is not there, then they hopefully will back off too. But with black bears, we tell people typically you're better off if you, generally speaking, if you will fight back, because their motive is to prey on you, and playing dead doesn't necessarily work very well for you. So that's just kind of a real quick overview of what do you do if you see a bear. Let's see, keep on going the wrong way here. You know, can we live with bears? Typically, check my time here. I better get quick here. You know, just managing bears in the backcountry. I'm gonna tell you one quick story and then we'll move on to questions. But the story of Blake and Emmett, campsite 49, we had bears at this campsite, which was probably 5 miles up the trail on Bradley Fort from Smokemont Campground. It's a campsite where the trail dead ends at the campsite. So we had a lot of activity. Back then, we really didn't have anything way to monitor a campsite. It was pretty subjective. So I usually would put 2 student conservation resource assistants, volunteers. I didn't say guinea pigs. 2 of those people back there to get some experience. Well, they got a little bit more experience than what I was hoping for. So I typically would send them back there for 2 nights. If nothing happened, then we felt comfortable of reopening the campsite after we closed it for, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks. Well, the first night, nothing happened. So Blake you saw a picture of Blake earlier. Blake was just kind of a 6'4" guy, big old raw bone country boy from Southern Illinois, a super good guy. Now he's it's Dr. McCann. He actually is the wildlife biologist. I think forgot what park he's in right now too. But I think he's in either North or South Dakota now. But anyway, he was in there. He was trying to get an experience. He was trying to develop a good resume, you know, so he could start applying for school or for jobs. Emma was this girl from England, and Emma was just a sweetheart too. And she had called me or emailed me wanting to get some experience with black bear. And she said, you know, I wanted to try to overcome a fear of black bears. And I said, okay. I said, this is the place to get some experience with black bears. She said, also, I have a fear of, she kind of paused. She said, I have a fear of Southern men. I went, well, I said, hold on just a second. Southern men, what's your fear there? She said, well, here in England, we thought that Southern men, when they see a woman, they chase them down. I said, well, what do they do? She said, oh, I don't know what they do. They never told us that. I said, look, Emma, I'm not saying I'm not saying it will never happen. My chances are you're not going to find a Southern man chase you down if they see you. So anyway, so she had those two fears. And so the first night they camped there at campsite 49, nothing happened. The second night she heard horses riding up about midnight. Blake was already asleep. Emma was there. She heard these horses riding up. And so there were probably people riding in from the boundary trail to poach bear because they knew the campsite was closed because of bear activity. So Emma was laying there. She was terrified and she was afraid to move because you know what she thought? She thought, it's the Southern men. They know I'm here and that's why they've come in here. So anyway, but they stayed for a short time, turned around and left. The second time she was laying there and she heard an animal walking around the tent and it would blow every once in a while. So sometimes pigs will do that. They'll kind of blow the soil out of their nostrils to be able to smell for food. But this was a bear and it was walking around the tent. It was pushing on the tent down at the feet, kind of depressing the tent, trying to evaluate what was in there. Well, Emma hadn't said anything and Blake was still sound asleep. And she said, Blake, wake up, wake up. I think there's a bear outside of our tent. So sure enough, he gets up and he sets up in the tent. Of course, it's black. I mean, you can't see anything. So this bear is pushing down on the tent right at his feet, which is in the sleeping bag. And as it did, he turned off and backhand this bear kind of right in the snout and knocked the bear back. Then it got really quiet. Then the bear jumped on the tent on top of Blake, ripped through the tent, grabbed him by his foot, which was in the sleeping bag, and started to pull him out of the tent. Well, Emma then grabbed his hands and was trying to pull him back in the tent. So they had a little tug of war there for a while. Blake could remember he had his pistol in his backpack. He was able to get that pistol out, discharge it in the air, which is of course illegal in the park to do now. And the bear released him and they yelled, screamed, moved the bear away where they could gather their things up and left. They walked the 5 miles back to Smoky campground that night. Couldn't get anybody on the telephone. And so Blake said, let's just go in one of the restrooms here and lay down until daylight, which they did. They laid down shortly and Blake actually laid down and went to sleep. Emma was sitting back on the corner of the restroom and she said, she leaned over and I said, Blake, I said, what was Emma doing? He said, she was set over in the corner and she had her knees pulled up to her chest and she was clenched onto a hatchet, holding a hatchet right in front of her. I said, Blake, how in the world can you sleep with a woman holding a hatchet that way? He said, I was just really tired. Okay, so she's laying there and Emma hears something outside and wakes Blake up again, says, go outside. I think the bear's followed us down here. He gets up, walks around it, nothing there. So he takes his backpack and wedges it under the door. So Emma will leave him alone. So he wedges his backpack under the door won't open. So they both go to sleep. And then about daylight, this little old lady comes to the door to use the restroom and starts pulling on that door. Well, when she did, Emma looked up and saw that door move and she immediately thought the bear was trying to pull the door open and come in there where they were. So she said, Blake, the bear is coming through the door. So he jumps up, runs over and kicks that door and knocks this little lady off outside and on her back. So he stands there in the doorway with the door pushed open and she said, sir, I just want to go to the restroom. He said, well, come on in, ma'am. Said, no, I'll go on the men's side. So she went around and either went to the men's side or went back to her campsite too. And I never got to talk to her. I wish I had, but I have no idea what she went back and told the people in her party too. Probably wasn't positive too. Anyway, they got them back and brought Blake and Emma back over, and they were in shock. And they said, Emma looked at me and she said, are there any churches in this area? I said, yeah, there's a lot of churches in this area. She said, I'm Catholic. I said, well, go. My boss is Catholic, so you're welcome to go with him. So Emma went to church every single Sunday before she went back to England. So there are probably some promises made that night. She did tell me, she said, you know, that 5 mile walk back to Smoky, she said, I talked to my mama and God a whole lot that night too. So anyway, and Blake was concerned I was going to, fire him because he'd used his pistol. Of course, I didn't. I said, Blake, you did what you had to do to be able to do that. So anyway, Blake, Blake went back to Illinois and Emma went back to England too. I never heard another peep out of Emma after that at all. But anyway, she did send me an email thanking me for the experience. Said, no thanks necessary, Emma. I apologize all that happened. And now we use cameras. We don't put people up there to be able to monitor a campsite. And she said, okay. And I said, I'm just curious, are you still going to work with bears, you know, as a career? She said, yeah, I think so. But she said, really only on the computer, never in the field ever again. So anyway, I said, I understand. So anyway, but I've never talked to her after that. So that's just kind of a story that kind of we want to talk about. I'm going to say this really quickly. The vet school at UT have been really good as far as repairing bears with injuries and things like that. Appalachian Bear Rescue, they've dealt over, I put well over to really, I think 335 bears right now. So they've rehabbed a lot of bears as well too. They still have some there that's wintering over too. So giving bears a second chance is pretty, it's a good organization that really does a lot of good. Just really quickly, you know, I knew this picture here of the bear walking like in the circus on top of a cable. I knew we were in trouble. And I thought, I'm not sure that that everybody's smarter than some of these bears in the park, but bears are different too. I think what's happening right now, we're having a lot of bears getting food, and they're in an area where basically, you know, very few of them ever get killed by hunters illegally or illegally. And so you're having as many as 5 bear cubs produced. So it's kind of a unique situation too. I want to talk about this Bear 75. He traveled over 1,500 miles to try to get back to his home in Cades Cove. And I'm probably going to end on that, Carol, because I know we're about out of time. And we'll be able to take any questions that people may have.
Do you want to go? You're going to tell that story? Because that's a good story.
I can. I didn't know if I was out of time or not.
Yeah, good. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, Bear 75 too, he actually was, his home territory was Cades Cove, on the far end of Cades Cove. He'd actually torn into the old grist mill out there, tore the boards off of it, and people have been leaving garbage out, you know, along in overfilled garbage cans. He got food conditioned pretty quickly. So I started this process of trying to move him, which he was a very unique bear. He had a very, very strong homing instinct. And all bears were not like this bear, but this bear had he was kind of a novelty type bear, if I guess you could say, and he was pretty famous. And I think his nickname was Brutus. So I'll refer to him as Brutus. So we started moving Brutus within the park, and he came back from the far end of the park over at Cataloochee in North Carolina, came back from there. Then we took him down to the southern end of Tennessee, not in Georgia, but we were pretty close to Georgia, and he returned back from there. We took him then to the northern end, all back up in Johnson County, right there at the corner of North Carolina, Tennessee, and the southern part of Virginia. And guess what? He came back there. But in that particular time, he actually came through the TWRA, Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency, captured him walking through the VA parking lot. And they caught him and said, hey, I've got Bear 75. I said, you're kidding me. Well, he made it back to the park from there. We tried him back to Cataloochee one more time, and he came back from there. So really, I didn't have anywhere else to move him. I couldn't move him east or west. So I called a friend of mine in Virginia. I said, hey, would you all consider taking this Bear 75? He's not a bad bear. He's never injured anyone. He's food conditioned in his home territory. But all the places I've moved him, he's never carried that nuisance behavior with him. So they said, let us see. So they got it approved. So I took Bear 75 400 miles from the park up to Harrisonburg, Virginia. They put a radio collar on him so they can keep up with him. They take him over. They took their bears that they relocated over to a little logging road right on the West Virginia border, release them. And Jerry Blank, who was the bear biologist, said, you know, I've released, I don't know, hundreds of bears on this road. I back the vehicle up, they jump out of the truck, they run to the north, I never see them again. So Bear 75 was anesthetized or asleep that 6-hour drive from the park up there. So I know he didn't drop breadcrumbs or have a GPS or something, but he was awake when they released him. He jumped out of the truck, and the bear biologist said that he ran up probably 40 or 50 yards and stopped and started looking around and started bobbing his head, kind of going in a circular motion. And then when he did that, he said he looked straight back to me to the south and started going back south just like that. And how they do that, I have no idea. But Jerry said I ran down the woods, tried to run him back up, and he said he got around me. But to make a long story short, he averaged 10 to 12 miles south, going down the Appalachian chain, heading back home to Cades Cove. He went all the way, traveled all the way down to Whitfield, Virginia. And actually they caught him there walking through a development going south. They caught him, took him back farther north, almost to Maryland, and released him again. Repeated the same behavior, 10 to 12 miles south, going back down. He went down to Roanoke, Virginia, walking through town, and the police chased him there. And actually they injected a drug into him that's xylazine hydrochloride. It really produces a sleep-like state. It doesn't necessarily knock the animal completely out unless you use too much of it. But anyway, they anesthetized him, or at least partially anesthetized him, sedated him is a better word. And then they roped him and pulled him back into a police van to haul him out of town. And by doing so, they actually pulled the radio collar off of him, and then we lost contact with him. But I always wished I was a fly on the wall of that van, trying to see who was going to drive that van with this bear in the back of it too. Anyway, they took him outside of Roanoke, released him, and we lost contact with him until the next time he was caught. He was caught by Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency. Again, guess where? In Johnson City, in the parking lot of the VA hospital. The same place they'd caught him the year before too. So apparently he knew exactly where he was going. He was going down there. They caught him, took him outside the area, released him, and unfortunately he was killed illegally. I think he was eating blackberries, insect larvae and stuff near this little remote development too. So it kind of caused a big stir. There was a lot of people upset about it, which of course I was one of those people as well. Big reward, but no one was ever charged with that poaching case too. But anyway, it changed me too. Bear 75's life was not in vain. It kind of gave me it focused me on garbage. I knew how garbage had changed Bear 75, and I knew that was the way we were going to win in the Smokies to hopefully keep these bears wild, was to work on garbage, secure it. And Steve Herrero put it the best by saying, the fundamental way that you manage black bear populations is you keep your food and garbage away from them, and they'll do okay. So really what killed Bear 75 wasn't necessarily that poacher entirely. It was really all of us and all the people who don't secure their garbage or food in a manner that they can't get to it as well. So anyway, so a lot of things changed after Bear 75 was killed, and we started getting things going the right direction and be more proactive than necessarily reactive. Okay. Carol?
Yes, sir. So thank you very much. And every time I hear the story about Brutus, I always hope for a happy ending. I want to think of him living a life of leisure out there eating blackberries and outrunning some game warden wildlife biologist. So thank you for that. We've got some questions if you still have some time. And of course, I think all of us are I'm gonna reframe the weight that I've lost during the pandemic to it's my bear attack prevention layer that I put on during the COVID shutdown. But we've got a couple of questions about the increased sightings of bears and in Boone and in other areas. I'm wondering, is the bear population increasing, and if so, why?
You know, it is increasing, I think, across the board in the eastern U.S. The bear populations are going up, and there's a lot of reasons for that as well too. There's been a lot of food. Obviously, that makes a big difference too. And typically before, I think our landscape ownership has changed somewhat too. Before, you know, bear hunting actually is a tool that state wildlife agency used to kind of keep bear populations in check. I think what's happened, at least my opinion, it's just my opinion, is all the property has been bought by people who don't really support hunting, bear hunting. And these bears are actually getting unnatural food. And rather than, you know, kicking out 2 or 3 cubs, which is normally the norm for that, now they're having 3, 4, and 5 cubs too. And so they've created little mini sanctuaries out there that these animals do. And it's just building and building and building. And so these bears are expanding out north. They're going in places they had never been before in Tennessee, North Carolina. They're having bears, of course, in Asheville that are hibernating along the interstate. Happened in Wares Valley, in around the park too, where these bears are basically hibernating in areas they would never have done before too. So I think that's probably part of it too. You know, bears have to live a pretty good length of time before they're able to have cubs and reproduce and contribute back to that population too. But when they have 4 and 5 cubs, and none of those animals ever are controlled by something, then your bear population is going to increase as well. The harvest in these states is going up every year in North Carolina and Tennessee. So, and I think that's probably going to continue at some point. So anyway, can we change it? Yeah, we can. It's a pretty monumental task to be able to keep food and garbage away from these bears. But hopefully if we can keep them wild, they'll tend to regulate themselves.
Okay, thank you for that. And we've got a couple of questions about the prevention of bear attacks, wondering if air horns or jingling your keys or whistling, ringing a bell as you're out hiking, if any of those things would be helpful in preventing encountering a bear.
That's a great question. I appreciate that too. But let me say this. Remember I said before, bears have individual personalities, just like people have individual personalities. Sometimes if someone picks a fight with you and they're not really a big person and they're not very experienced, it probably doesn't take much to deter that person from having a fight with you. Other people, you're going to lose every single time. Bears are kind of the same way. Sometimes it only takes you raising your voice and a bear will run away. Other times it may take raising your voice, throwing a rock, and that bear is going to run away. Some bears, you can raise your voice, you can throw rocks, you can blow whistles, you can yell, scream, charge, whatever you want to. And a lot of times it doesn't seem like it works at all. So there's different degrees of these bears out there of what it takes to deter that bear from getting closer to you. So like I say, every bear is different. And you just have to have the tools in your toolbox. And some of those tools are air horns. It could be bear spray. And just have the knowledge that if that bear is coming toward you, what you should or shouldn't do. That is very, very important too. Now, let's say, for example, if you go around a curve and you encounter a bear that's eating on a deer carcass or let's say a blackberry or blueberry patch is eating blueberries, then in that bear, you surprise that bear and it bluff charges you. Basically, it starts woofing, swatting the ground, popping its jaws. What that bear is telling you is you're too close. That's a defensive behavior. And when they vocalize that way, it's telling you, I want some space. And I would do that if I were you. I would tend to back up, talk in a very low tone voice and say, I'm sorry, bear, I've got too close. Back up and increase that space. So that's a defensive. It's when these bears follow people, they don't vocalize at all. They just focus on you. Typically, that's going to be more offensive, and those are the ones to be more concerned about. But when they're popping their jaws, bluff charging, swatting the ground, shaking vegetation too, the bear's message to you is you're too close to me. You need to back up.
All right, good information. We've also had a couple of questions from people who said there have been reports of bears found with missing limbs, missing paws. You know anything about that?
Someone actually in New Mexico sent me that question too, and I don't think we know for sure why. A lot of times bears will get hit by a car. It'll damage a front leg or a back leg too. And that actually, I've had one bear that had a damaged front leg too. And actually the leg actually drew up and it was just a little small, front paw right here too. And it was on 3 legs. And that bear was still turning over dumpsters with 3 legs. He was actually rocking those dumpsters and turning the dumpsters over even with 3 legs. So they don't need 4 legs. They can do very well on 3. But who knows? People always say it's trapping. I'm not saying it's not, but I would probably lean towards it's not trapping. So I tend to think it's more traumatic in nature, probably either falling out of a tree, getting hit by a car, those kind of things to where it causes the injuries too. And you have, sometimes you'll see where a limb is missing. There's no paw there. It may have been born that way. We really don't know for sure. So I think that's an unknown out there that not many people can nail down.
Okay. And do you feel that the bear population, I mean, the bears are found in pretty much in every county in North Carolina? I mean, I know in Pocosin, there's a big, large bear population there, and of course in the Great Smoky Mountains. But are they pretty much in every county, like sort of like a coyote in North Carolina, or are they staying in the more rural areas?
You know, I don't know the answer to that, Carol. I'm not really for sure. I do know this, that there's a big bear population over on the west side of North Carolina, eastern North Carolina. Matter of fact, the biggest male bears in North America, believe it or not, are in Pennsylvania and the coastal counties of North Carolina. So you guys growing big over there.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of in Pocosin seeing some black bears a few years ago. So they're majestic. We've got a question about elk and how the elk are coming along in the park and other parts of North Carolina. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I can. Yeah, of course, we brought in 52 elk from a combination of Land Between the Lakes in Western Kentucky and Elk Island National Park in Alberta, Canada too. And you know, I'm not up to speed as much as Justin McVeigh in North Carolina and the people from the park at all, but how many elk do we have? You know what? I think that's a number out there. It's increasing. I've heard it was 150 plus for a long time, and I think the key word there is plus. We don't really know for sure too. It's really hard to nail down a good, an accurate information on how many elk are out there or how many bears. I'll never forget Dr. Pelton. When he spent 30 some odd years studying bears, he finally came out with an estimate of 15 or 1600. Well, that was pretty simple to understand, but the confidence limits were plus or minus 900. So with a 15 or 1600 plus or minus 900, then obviously that tells you it's really hard to nail down a good number too. Now I think the number in the park is over 1900 from Dr. Joe Clark at University of Tennessee. So you know what, the elk population I think is doing okay. Elk are showing up from places that we never had before. I think they're expanding as well too, because we've had elk that have moved down to South Carolina. I think we had an elk that a female that left the Smokies a couple of years, was kind of moving to the southeast, and she finally ended up in on a Christmas tree farm. It was a Tom Sawyer Christmas tree farm in Glenville Lake. As you're going over to, let's see, my battery on my computer's a little bit low. Anyway, I went over in a couple of days and actually caught her and brought her back as well too. But she apparently couldn't get along with anybody, because I put her back in the park and she stayed a short period of time and took off again as well too. But so they're moving around as well. We've had elk move into Tennessee from North Carolina. We've had an elk that was killed on the highway from Kentucky. That was one of the original elk released in Kentucky, in Hazard County, Kentucky, and it was killed over near Lake Junaluska. So they can travel long distances. I mean, they're looking for food, looking for companionship, and just a space where they can live too. But I think overall the elk population is doing well.
Well, good. Yeah, I had a fabulous experience with the elk at the entrance there in Cherokee a couple of years ago, end of September. Just elk everywhere. It was fabulous. And before you lose battery, shameless plug time. Where can we buy your books?
Oh, okay. Amazon is one of the easiest places. Whether you want to e-copy or the paperback too, you can go to Amazon and search for Bear in the Back Seat and pick up both of those. Or you can go to the visitor centers in the Smokies and pick those up as well too. So that either one of those places are a good place.
Okay, great. Thank you. Who's your publisher? Who publishes your books? Uh-oh. Did we lose Kim?
We might have lost Kim. That would have been
Okay.
The battery caught up to him.
His batteries died. Well, I will, Daniel, I try to find out who carries his book. I mean, who's his publisher, and see if I can get him in the store too. And we can do another, we'll send him a case and get him to sign them, and we'll do another fundraiser for Hawk that way. So, so that would be, because I've read both of his books and they're absolutely fabulous. He's lived the life that I wish I had lived. So, anyway, so thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that. If you ever have a chance to hear Kim speak again, he's got a million of these stories. He's calling me right now on my cell phone. So I will say good night. Let's see if he has any last messages. Hey, Kim. That's okay. Okay. All right. All right. Well, then Amazon will be the way to go then. So I'll let everybody know. So I'm just signing off. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Bye-bye. So anyway, he says the book is self-published. So I think Amazon or the Visitor Center is going to be the best way to do it. So thank you, everybody.
We will see you next month.
All right. Bye, Daniel.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome 2021.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Bye-bye.
Good night.